Today we're going to talk about 3 things that your main character must have for your story to be successful, and a way to kind of incorporate them that's really a really good tactic if you can figure out how to do it for your specific story. Thank you so much for liking, subscribing. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for comments, questions, all those things. We're just talking about story stuff here, so if you got a question about story, drop it in the comments below. But as is the norm here, I don't really like to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff and waste your time. Let's jump in. Okay, the 3 things that you need to have for your main character, I'm going to tell you what they are, and then we're going to kind of break each of them apart. So the 3 things are a want, a need, and a life dream. Now, you may have heard those terms before, and they kind of get used in different ways. What I am describing is the general way, the common way that people use them, especially in storytelling circles, and what we mean when we talk about what a want or a need or a life dream is. The first thing that you have to understand, and this applies to all 3 of these terms, is that each of the 3 must be attainable by the character within the scope of the story. So you have your story, you have the whole thing, you know, beginning to end, here's where it starts, here's where it ends. Their life dream, their want, their need, all of those have to be attainable within that. So you can't, for example, tell me a story about a character and it's Sylvia, and Sylvia is working and she wants to move up in management, and maybe her life dream is to retire to an island. If that's her life dream, I better know by the end of the story whether or not Sylvia is going to be on the island or not. So maybe this is a whole life story and we see the ups and downs of her career all the way throughout. You know, does she get the island or not? If retiring on an island is part of her life dream, and I'll explain them in a second, these terms in a second, but if that's part of her life dream, I've got to know the answer to that in the scope of the movie or in the scope of the story. So don't think about a life dream or something like that, maybe that you particularly have. Maybe you have a life dream. Maybe you want to be a published author or have a movie made, or, you know, write a sequel to your favorite franchise, something like that. You want to have a career that lets you do that. And those are great. But if we're telling a story about your life, then we need to see the answer to that question within the scope of the story. And hopefully that makes sense, because some writers, what they'll do is they'll imagine these specific things, a life dream, a want, and a need, but then we never get an answer to them within the scope of the story. And the story feels very unsatisfying and the characters feel very flat. So what you need to do is make sure that you've got a life dream, a want, and a need for your main character, and that it is attainable within the scope of the story. That doesn't mean they have to get it. It means they have an opportunity to get it, okay? And that's the really important distinction. So that applies to all 3. Okay, let's talk about each of them, and we'll kind of break them apart a little bit, and then I'll give you a good strategy at the end. So first, let's deal with life dream, because that's one of the ones, that's kind of the bigger one. So if we're talking about the whole movie, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, this is the one that really spans the whole movie. Now, the life dream is ultimately what a character hopes or fears is going to happen. Here's what they're after. Here's what they want. Here's what they want to achieve. Here's their imagined future, and it's tied to hope and fear. I hope I get this. I'm afraid I'm not going to get this. I hope I make enough money I can buy a house. I'm afraid I'm not going to make enough money to buy a house. Okay, that might be a good life dream. Let's just say that's part of her life dream. We'll use Sylvia again. So we're going to say Sylvia's life dream is to buy a house. That's her hope. Okay, she's worried about that. That's her hope. But this life dream, one of the things it does is it is what moves the character from Act 1. So we've got all our stuff in Act 1. If you want to know structures, I'll link a video up here. Act 1 is just really the kind of the setup, and here's what's going on, here's the predicament, and our character is going to choose to either engage or disengage in the predicament. Let's say this thing is, hey, there's a job opportunity for you, Sylvia, and it's working at this company. It's pretty new. Nobody knows really anything about it. They're kind of secretive, feels like a shadow organization, but man, the pay is really good. The benefits are great. And what Sylvia is thinking is like, hey, if I work this job just for 6 months, I'm going to be able to buy my house. So her want then, and that becomes our next one, we'll get to that in a second. Her want then is, I want to get this job and have it for 6 months and maybe get a promotion. That's what she wants. Why? Because that's going to lead to her life dream. Okay, the life dream is what propels the character from Act 1 into Act 2. It makes them act. It's the motivation. It's the why they do what they do. Why does your character rush into the building to try to save people? Why does your character decide they're going to fly on a mission to space? Why does your character decide they want to try to date this other person? All of those are related to the life dream. That's their motivation. That's why they're doing what they're doing. The other thing about a life dream is it has to be measurable. Sylvia buying a house is measurable. We can see her literally buy the house or not. We know if she gets it or not. If, though, the life dream is something like Sylvia says, oh, I want to be successful. Well, that's not a great life dream. Like, how do you measure success? How you measure success, how I measure success might be very different, right? So I need something very tangible and measurable. And why is that important? Well, I need to give the audience something to root for. I need to let them know, here's what you're rooting for. You're rooting for Sylvia to be able to buy this house. Okay? That's what we're rooting for. And what's going to happen is we will get an answer to that in Act 3. So the life dream, we find out about it in Act 1. It's what motivates the character to move into Act 2, their want, which we're going to talk about in a second. And the life dream, we get an answer to that in the third act. Maybe Sylvia buys the house. Maybe she doesn't buy the house. I don't know what's going to happen in Act 2 yet, right? I'm just thinking of the story. I got to start with a life dream. What is her life dream? Because that's what's going to motivate, and I'll get an answer for it later. One other way you might have heard this explained is the spine of the story. I need a spine. I need something to kind of hang stuff on. That's what the spine is. It's something that goes all the way from the beginning to the end. The life dream goes from Act 1 all the way through Act 2 to Act 3. The other two are mostly housed in Act 2, although one of them is Act 3. So our life dream is Act 1 all the way to Act 3. That's the spine of the story. So you may hear it described that way, but what we're really talking about is the life dream of the character. Okay, the second of these terms, the want, I've talked about a little bit, but let's dive a little deeper. When you talk about a want of a character, what you're really talking about in a broad sense are the long and short-term goals that that character has. The other part of that, though, is that that character believes that those long and short-term goals are going to get them closer to their life dream. So life dream's kind of driving things, but my long and my short-term goals are going to help me get there. So for Sylvia, back to our example for Sylvia for a second, maybe one of Sylvia's long-term goals is I want to get a promotion at this job within the next 6 months. That might be a long-term goal. A short-term goal is I want to make a good impression on my first day at work. I want to make a couple of friends. I want to give a really good presentation. Those are short-term goals, and all of those things are leading toward her bigger desire of buying a house, right? But that buying the house is part of the want of I want to be here longer than 6 months. I want to get a promotion. That's what I want to do. What you want to do, though, is you want to take one of those long-term goals, and that's how you want to structure your second act. The whole second act might be, will Sylvia get a promotion within 6 months or not? Okay? That's the question we have. And all through the second act, that's what everything is hinging on. Maybe she's doing some things, she does a presentation. Hey, that goes really well. Maybe somebody makes a pass at her. That doesn't go so well. Those are cliche things, right? But what if she starts finding out that her company is actually double dealing with other governments? Maybe it's a defense contractor and they're selling things to the US government, but they're also selling things under the table to the Russian government. Well, Sylvia finds out about that. Or maybe they're fixing the stock price to fabricate their finances, and Sylvia finds out about this. Well, now she's got some conflict, right? Now, do I want to stay here? Do I want to be part of this? Maybe she does want to be part of it. Maybe she doesn't want to be part of it. Will she still stick it out all the way to the end so that she can buy her house? Will she get the promotion? And that will she get the promotion, that want that she has, that is what is driving all of the second act. So the wants of a character are short-term or long-term that help them get closer to their life dream. The third one is need, the need of the character. The need is simply what the character needs to learn. This one's probably the easiest one to remember and in some ways the simplest to explain. You have people that you know in your life and you see them, let's just say there's somebody that has some destructive behavior. What they need is to get out of their destructive behavior, but they're not really doing that. But we see that, right? So we see this person struggling with here's their want, they're doing things they want, but we know this is something they need to do. This is what they should do, right? And in some ways you can kind of take this and say, hey, this is basically internal conflict at its core. And in some ways that's kind of true, right? It's what I want versus what I should be doing, right? I want the chocolate bar, but I should eat an apple, okay? This need is what is present in the character's life. And the character, your character, may not realize what their need is initially, okay? They may not realize it. They come to learn it over the course of the story. So over the course of the second act, they start to learn what their need is. And the thing with the need is we typically get an answer for that in the third act. So to recap, we have our life dream, which spans Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. We have our wants, which are typically just in Act 2. There might be some in Act 3, depending on the structure of your film. But if Act 3 is just resolution, there's no wants. So I have wants. And then I have needs of the character, which are in Act 2, and I get an answer to that in Act 3. So I find out if the character is going to get their need or not. So let's take our example with Sylvia here. Let's say that Sylvia, one of the things she needs is she needs to be a little more courageous. When we meet her, she's very timid. She's shy. She's very smart. She's very intelligent. She's very competent. She can totally do the job. But she's a little shy. She's timid. She doesn't like to speak up. She doesn't like to defend herself. She doesn't like to try to protect herself. And maybe one of the things that we need to see happen over the course of the story is she starts to become a little more courageous, while she's also moving toward this bigger want of getting a promotion after 6 months. But we've got some problems that start happening, right? And she finds out some things about the company. Maybe things aren't going like she had hoped, or the company is in doing some nefarious dealings that she becomes aware of, and she's not really into that, and yet she really wants this promotion, and she's on track to get the promotion because she's doing all the things that she should do, and she's learning to be more and more courageous and speak up for herself and do the right thing and all of that stuff, right? So she's doing all of this. Here's the trick, and here's one of the ways, and the best way that you can use these elements together is at the end of the second act, when the character's long-term goal is within reach. She can get a promotion. She's made it. Her boss has basically said, you're going to get the promotion. What you do is you force the character to choose between their want and their need. Force them to choose. So she wants the promotion, but what she needs to do is speak up and defend herself and maybe protect the company. But if she does that, she might lose her job, and she might lose everything. And that's what you want. You want to force your character into a position where they're having to choose between their want and their need. And all of a sudden, their life dream is in question. Maybe they'll get it, and maybe they won't. Now, here's what happens in some stories. So in some stories, you force that choice and the character chooses their want. They get the thing that they are after. The character is really excited about it, but as the audience, we are not, because we know what they needed to do and they didn't choose it. Maybe in the third act, they might give up what they got and choose their need because they know that's the right thing to do. Maybe. Sometimes, though, it doesn't end that way. It ends and we're just kind of very reflective and very somber. Because, that didn't end like I wanted it to end. The character didn't do what they needed to do. They did what they wanted to do. And so you just kind of feel deflated as an audience member. But if you force your character to choose between their want and their need, and they choose their need, maybe they also end up getting their want at the end. Sometimes that happens, and that's really where we get like the happy ending. Because the character has grown, they've become somebody they didn't think they could be at the beginning. They've become somebody else. They've become somebody better. They did their need. They chose their need. And then they were ultimately able to get their life dream. So maybe their want didn't manifest exactly how they imagined it, but they were still able to get their life dream because they did the things that they needed to do. That's the best way to incorporate life dream, want, and need. But you have to have them because what they do is they give your character depth. They give your character dimension. So if you're getting notes about, I've got a flat character, or my characters are flat, chances are, especially your main character, probably doesn't have a very clearly defined life dream, want for the second act and need that they're having to wrestle with. So if you're getting that note, you should probably consider looking at trying to better incorporate one of these three things. If you're planning a story, before you start writing, figure out what those things are. Figuring them out will actually help you tell a much better story. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have, please like, subscribe, bell, all that stuff. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you have questions or comments, leave them below. Otherwise, happy writing. If you're going to tell a story that matters. See you later.